So we're going to jump back into Jarnail Singh's testimony now to the Post Office inquiry, and Jason Beard puts to him that he's trying to generate what he calls an air of detachment between what he was doing and what was happening at the Post Office. He certainly seems willing to identify mistakes, that he's made mistakes, but then doesn't seem want to elaborate on what mistakes he actually individually made, instead turning around and saying that his mistakes were relying on other people, that Horizon wasn't robust, and that's what he was led to believe, and that he's sorry for what the subpostmasters have been through. Despite the suggestions that he wants to take responsibility for these actions, that's as far as he goes in terms of mistakes that he's describing openly to the inquiry himself. And he says he's keen not to blame other people, but then he's also keen to point out that the responsibility for investigations and the decisions of senior management weren't his to take, and also cites workload as a concern, and maybe the Post Office weren't capable of managing the prosecution cases that they were launching. There's quite a lot to unpick here, so let's jump into the inquiry.
What scores did they give you when they marked your work?
I don't think they actually gave us a mark, but certainly if there was no proof or, but there was no proof or whatever it is, they would turn it back and say, no, it's not good enough. We're not going to proceed with it because there's no evidence.
In the long answer you've just given, you reflect the approach that you've taken in your witness statement, would you agree? Generating an air of detachment from you, of you personally, from everything that was going on, blaming the individual investigators, the Fujitsu witnesses and Fujitsu the company, and the independent bar for anything that had gone wrong. That's your overall take, isn't it?
Absolutely not. I take full responsibility for the bits I was involved in. You cannot work alone on these things, can't you? If you're going to do something successful, I think that no person can actually exist on his own. You've got to work it together. You've got to piece everything together. I'm not blaming the investigators. I'm not blaming the bar. All I'm saying is that I took this role very, very seriously. It really hurts me to actually prosecute anybody, to somebody to go to court and then lose their livelihood, and also to lose, on top of it, not only that, and then the damage to the reputation and credibility when there shouldn't have been any need for it.
So he has apologised to the subpostmasters. I mean, whether they'll view that as too little too late, I would imagine that they would be justified in having that opinion. But he is kind of trying to clarify, shall we say, on his witness statement, saying, I'm not saying everybody else is at fault and I'm not, but that I was basically a small cog in a big machine.
Overall, would you agree that the impression that you seek to create in your witness statement is one of acting with the utmost professionalism at all times, but of sorrow and being hurt after the event? Because if only you had known about Horizon, everything would have been very different.
Absolutely not. I'm not that sort of person. It's not the way, maybe it come across wrong. It's not. I take full responsibility for the hurt and the sorrow people purses, and I think I was going to actually apologise to Julian Wilson's family, saying that he's not here to see that his good name has been put intact and things been put right. They're the ones who were telling everybody that the Horizon system is wrong, and nobody believed them. And they've been proved right now, and I'm with them.
So he is showing some humility here. It seems to be coming from a genuine place. Whether that is borne out by later facts remains to be seen. But it does seem that he genuinely is accepting some responsibility, which, to be fair, has been quite rare among other Post Office witnesses in terms of what we've heard during Phase 4 of the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry.
I think in those answers you said that you take responsibility for any mistakes that you made.
Well, I think we work for the...
Is that right?
Yes. I wish none of this has happened.
What mistakes did you make?
Well, the mistakes I made, presumably relying on other people to tell me how wonderful this system was. But then I wasn't the only one working there. I mean, you had, like I said, we had a team who worked on these cases. We had investigations throughout the country. Maybe it was just a big organisation. We couldn't manage it all. Maybe we were just given too much work to deal with. I don't know what the answer is, but certainly I take responsibility for everything. I mean, the last one I wanted to do is have what I got, what I'm faced with now, faced with the sub-postmaster who I advised on, saying that there's sufficient evidence, being prosecuted, and then being sentenced to something that they've been wrongly convicted of, and then being punished when they shouldn't have been. And I hope.
So I guess overall there he's citing workload as a concern, which other post office witnesses have also cited. It's a bit of a contradiction, I feel, in terms of saying I'm actually not blaming anyone else, but actually saying one of my mistakes was relying too much on what other people were telling me. Well, somebody then else is naturally to blame for that if what you're saying is they've given you information which wasn't necessarily true, or has induced you to take a different course of action than you otherwise might have done had you had a fuller picture presented to you.
This inquiry give them something so they can actually get on with their lives.
Have you identified any mistake that you made personally?
Well, the mistake I made was the fact that I was, again, like everybody else, led to believe that this system was good when it wasn't.
So you didn't make a mistake yourself personally in anything you did, other than placing reliance on other people?
Well, no, I'm like anything else. I mean, I thought I was probably the one, well, certainly I can tell you from what I did, all I did was I had a template each and every time. I put in the tests and I followed it through all the way to the actual matter going to the court, even the disclosure aspect of it. I mean, I took that very, very seriously. And I, in turn, read through it, went away, came back, made a few notes. So I don't know what you're asking me to say. Yes, of course I put my hand up. Of course I made mistakes. Everybody does. But these were very, very serious mistakes. And I wholeheartedly wish they never had ever happened. And I sometimes wish, we'd had the opportunity to leave the post office, which I left before this, mess, basically. That's all it is, isn't it? Because it wasn't somebody senior should have said, well, no, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Maybe the biggest mistake anybody made was to actually say, look, this isn't good. Well, where's the evidence? Where is the evidence the system is actually good?
So unpicking some of the things that Jarnail Singh said there, it's quite difficult at this early stage to get a thorough read on how he's feeling, because it's like, I don't want to blame anyone else, but my mistake was relying on other people. It could have been an organisational failing. There wasn't actually a lot of staff. Maybe we weren't capable of dealing with this. I religiously followed a template that I was given for prosecutions. I mean, that could help somebody who isn't necessarily very well experienced in criminal law themselves, but then it almost passes the responsibility onto those who generated the template and the policy process followed for the prosecutions. So at this stage, it's quite hard to get a grasp on how genuine this sorrow is. I mean, he does say, if this family of this sub-postmaster were here, I would apologise to them, but I guess that's easier said when they aren't there than if they were there themselves. And of course the sub-postmasters do have representatives themselves that he could say that there to, not least their legal teams. So it does feel like if he did want to address them, I'm presuming that would have been allowed in the inquiry, that he could actually address them through the representatives, as he does admit that he's never actually met any of the sub-postmasters, or presumably by extension any of their representatives, and as they are there at the post office inquiry, presumably the next best thing would be issuing that apology to them, rather than saying, well, I would issue an apology. There's a difference between making an apology and saying, well, I would if things were different.